Hello, good morning everybody. I am Dr. Sonia Tiwari from the Department of Community Medicine, Arvindo Medical College, Indore. Today we will cover the spotters related to environment, and we are covering these spotters from the book of Mastering Practicals in Community Medicine by Dr. Purnima Tiwari and Dr. Shashank Tiwari. So let's start. The first spot, as you can see here, is the minimum and maximum thermometer, right? So let's see the questions which are related to it. A brief description which is given, as you can see here in the figure, it is a U-shaped. It is a U-shaped thermometer, glass tube. The left arm of the tube is for recording the minimum temperature. Right arm records the maximum temperature. The left, that is the minimum arm, has a reservoir of spirit at the top end. The spirit volume expands with a rise in temperature and contracts with a decrease. There is a column of an indicator fluid in the U-tube. This can be mercury or any other colored fluid. Both the arms have pointers that can move up when pushed up by the mercury. Once pushed up, these pointers remain in that position and cannot come down until reset. Hence, these pointers can only be pushed upward by the mercury column. These pointers can be pushed up only by the mercury column and not the spirit, which runs past these without moving them. The minimum and maximum thermometer works by expansion and contraction of only the spirit and not the mercury column. Okay, so this is a U shape, as you can see, and it is a left arm, left arm recording the minimum temperature and right arm for the maximum temperature. Then the spirit volume, it expands with the rise in temperature, contracts with the decrease. Then there is a fluid indicator, okay, and both the arms, they have pointers, okay. These pointers can be pushed up only by the mercury column and not the spirit, which runs past these without moving them. And minimum and maximum thermometer works by the expansion and contraction of only the spirit and not the mercury column. So again you can see, though it's a black and white picture, we'll try to cover the colored pictures also later on. Now, how does it record the maximum temperature? As we have seen, it records minimum and maximum temperature. Now, how does it do? When the temperature rises, the spirit expands. The spirit column pushes the mercury column up into the right arm of the U-tube. The pointer in the right tube, that is the maximum arm, is pushed up and cannot drop back even if the temperature drops and the spirit and the mercury column falls back. The right arm has temperature markings starting from below and increasing upwards. So when the pointer is pushed up, it records a higher reading. For recording the minimum temperature, so maximum temperature you have seen here, okay, when the temperature rises, the spirit will expand and the spirit column will only push the mercury column up into the right arm of the U-tube. The pointer in the right tube, that is the maximum arm, is pushed up and cannot drop back even if the temperature drops and the spirit and the mercury column falls back. Right arm has temperature markings starting from below and increasing upward. So when the pointer is pushed up, it records a higher reading, that is the maximum temperature. Now what about recording of the minimum temperature? Now with a drop in temperature, spirit volume will contract. This pulls up the mercury column in the left arm. The rising column in the left arm pushes the left pointer up and the left minimum temperature arm is calibrated starting from the top and increased downward. Understood? Now hence the higher the pointer goes up in the left arm, lower is the temperature reading. The pointer cannot come down even if the mercury column is pushed down by expanding the spirit with any rise in the temperature. The next question, are separate thermometers for recording the minimum and maximum temperatures available too? Yes, separate thermometers for recording the maximum and minimum temperatures are also available. Okay. The fluid in the maximum thermometer is mercury, which expands with temperature rise and cannot fall back into the bulb with a drop in the temperature. The fluid in the minimum thermometer is the spirit. Okay. There is a pointer floating over the top of the spirit column, and when the temperature falls, the contracting spirit drags the pointer down, and when the temperature rises, the spirit flows past the pointer and does not push it up. Okay, so fluid in maximum thermometer is the mercury, which expands with the rise in temperature, and fluid in the minimum thermometer is the spirit, and there is a pointer floating over the top of the spirit column, and when the temperature falls down, it contracts. Okay, so this is about the maximum and the minimum thermometer. Now the next one is the dry bulb thermometer. The picture is not very clear here. Dry bulb thermometer is a mercury thermometer used to measure the air temperature. Okay, so for air temperature we are using a dry bulb thermometer, right? What precautions are needed while using this? It should be protected against radiant heat, direct sun and rain, and it is achieved by mounting it on the Stevenson screen. Okay. Then dry and wet bulb hygrometer. This is dry and wet bulb hygrometer. The readings are given here. Dry and wet is there. Okay. Now let's see the questions which are related to it. What is the use of dry and wet bulb hygrometer? Okay, so for hygrometer, just remember it is for humidity. H stands for humidity. Just for remembering, I am telling, it is used for calculating the relative humidity of the air. Now explain the principle underlying this. The dry bulb records the air temperature. The wet bulb is covered with a wet muslin cloth. The evaporation from this muslin cloth leads to a lower reading in the wet bulb thermometer. Difference between the temperature readings in the dry and the wet bulb thermometers gives an indication of the moisture content of the air. Again I am repeating, the dry bulb, it will record the air temperature, and the wet bulb is covered with a muslin cloth. Evaporation from the muslin cloth leads to a lower reading in the wet bulb thermometer, and difference between the temperature readings in the dry and the wet bulb gives an indication of the moisture content of the air. Now mention the fluid used in these thermometers. So mercury is used in both the dry and the wet bulb thermometers. How is it ensured that the bulb of the wet thermometer is always wet? The bulb of the wet bulb thermometer is always kept wet by means of muslin sheath fed by distilled water from a bottle through a wick. Then the next one is the sling thermometer. Mention the use. So it is used to calculate relative humidity and the dew point. Okay. Now describe its mechanism in brief. So it consists of two mercury thermometers, again one wet and one dry. These are mounted side by side on a wooden frame. Wooden frame is attached to a handle used to rotate the frame for ensuring air movement, and after a set number of rotations at a set speed, the readings of the two thermometers are noted, and the difference is used to calculate the relative humidity. Now how are the readings taken? First of all, wet bulb is moistened with a distilled water. Then the instrument is rotated at the rate of 4 revolutions per second for 15 seconds. This achieves an air speed of 5 m per second. The reading of the wet bulb is noted down. Instrument is whirled again for 10 seconds and the wet thermometer reading is taken again. This is repeated over and over till two identical values are noted successively. This point is also called as equilibrium. At this point, the reading of the dry bulb thermometer is also noted, and by putting these values in the appropriate charts and formula, the relative humidity is calculated. Okay, so first the wet bulb is moistened, then the instrument is rotated, then the wet bulb reading is noted down, then again the instrument is whirled for 10 seconds and again the reading is taken down. And this is repeated over and over till two identical values are noted, because that point is where you get two identical values by rotating again and again and taking the reading of the wet bulb. This point where the two identical values you receive is known as the equilibrium, and at this point the reading of the dry bulb thermometer is also noted, and by putting these values in the appropriate chart and formula, we can calculate the relative humidity as required. At what time of day is relative humidity minimum and maximum? Humidity values are higher in the early morning and are near minimum values in the afternoon at about 15 hours. Then coming to the next, that is the chlorescope. Why is this used for? So it is used for the estimation of residual chlorine in the drinking water. Which reagent is used? So orthotoluidine dissolved in 10% solution of hydrochloric acid. Now what is the inference if the test shows clear white color? So residual chlorine is absent. Briefly describe the steps of the test. So add 0.1 ml of the reagent to 1 ml of sample water. Okay. If the water turns yellow, we are taking 1 ml of sample water, whatever you want to test, and we are adding 0.1 ml of reagent into that water. Now if the water turns yellow, then you have to match the color against the color control disc. Depending upon the intensity of yellow color, the concentration of free chlorine is estimated. Now how is the concentration of free chlorine and combined chlorine measured? So reading is taken within 10 seconds of addition of orthotoluidine, which estimates the free chlorine in sample water, and the color that matches after 15 to 20 minutes indicates the combined concentration of free and combined chlorine. So I hope you understood. You have to take the sample water 1 ml, 0.1 ml you have to add the reagent, that is orthotoluidine reagent, and then immediately after 10 seconds when you match the yellow color, that is the free chlorine, and after 20 minutes if you see that yellow color concentration, that is the combined concentration of the free and the combined chlorine. What are the units in which the concentration of residual chlorine is expressed? So residual chlorine concentration is expressed in terms of parts per million, that is ppm or milligram per liters. What is the recommended level of residual chlorine in the drinking water? So recommended level of free residual chlorine in the drinking water is 0.5 milligrams per liter parts per million. This is often asked in your spotting. Recommended level of residual chlorine in the drinking water. So recommended level of free residual chlorine is 0.5 milligram per liter, or you can say parts per million. What is the recommended contact period with the residual chlorine level? A minimum contact period of 1 hour is recommended. Then mention some methods of household purification of water. So it is bleaching powder, chlorine solution, high test hypochlorite, chlorine tablets, iodine, potassium permanganate, and the filtration. State a simple household procedure to reduce the odor of chlorine in the superchlorinated sample of drinking water. Now sometimes if it is superchlorination, okay, it reduces or it leaves the smell of the chlorine. So what is that method to just reduce the odor? So it is aeration and adding sodium thiosulfate. This is often asked in the pre-PG question. Then coming to the next, that is the Horex apparatus. Okay, as you can see a little bit of imaginary picture over here since it's black and white. For what purpose will you use this? So it is used to calculate the dose of bleaching powder required for the disinfection of the given water sample. Mention some steps of the test. Now first is chlorine stock solution is prepared. How it is prepared? By mixing 2 grams of bleaching powder with the water up to the mark level in the black color cup. The cups, as you can see here, they are available with the apparatus itself. So in the black cup till the marking, you have to mix 2 grams of bleaching powder in the water. Then 6 white cups are there. They are filled with the water to be tested. Okay. Now use the pipette providing with the apparatus. 1 drop of stock solution is added to the first cup, 2 drops to the second, 3 drops to the third, and so on till you add 6 drops to the 6th cup. The water in each cup stirred using a separate rod for each cup. After waiting for half an hour, 3 drops of starch iodine indicator is added to each of the white cup. 3 drops in each cup, okay? Which indicator? Starch iodide. Then you get a blue color which indicates the presence of free residual chlorine. Now first cup which developed this color gives an estimate amount of bleaching powder needed to disinfect 455 liters of the sample water. Appearance of blue color indicates what? It indicates the presence of free residual chlorine. Then what should be the frequency of disinfection of wells during the epidemics? During the epidemic of cholera, the well should be disinfected every day. What inference will you draw if no cup has a blue color? Chlorine demand is not satisfied even in the 6th cup. This means that the chlorine demand of the water sample is very high and probably the sample water is polluted. What inference will you draw if all the cups give a blue color? Chlorine demand has been satisfied in the first cup itself, and since the chlorine demand of the water sample is low, only 1 scoop, that is 2 grams of bleaching powder, is required to provide residual chlorine for 455 liters of the sample water. Then the last question here is, what is the minimum contact period of chlorination that you will allow before water is drawn for use from a well just chlorinated? A minimum contact period of 1 hour is allowed before the water is drawn for the purpose of drinking. This is often asked in your spotters question. Okay, I hope it's clear. Now coming to the next, that is the borehole latrine. Enumerate the advantages of this type of latrine. So it is a non-service type, the pit is dark and non-prone to the breeding of flies. Disadvantage, special equipment agar is used. It has a small capacity, fills up quickly, difficult to construct, and not a sanitary latrine. Then enumerate the features of sanitary latrine. The excreta should not contaminate any water source nearby, that is the ground or surface water. Excreta should not pollute the surface soil. Excreta should not be accessible to flies and other animals such as pigs, dogs and cattle. Excreta should not create a nuisance due to stink or nasty appearance. Then coming to the sanitary well, often asked in your spotting questions. First question itself is asked many times. Enumerate the features present in this model for calling it a sanitary well. So you only have to write these points in your spotting question. That is, a lining is present, parapet wall is there, platform, drain, soakage pit, covering and a hand pump. Again I am repeating, a lining, parapet wall, platform, drain, soakage pit, covering and a hand pump. What is the soakage pit used for? It is used to drain the wastewater from the well, and it is constructed beyond the cone of filtration of the well. What are the advantages of using soaking pit? So to prevent mosquito breeding at many places. This is the advantage of using that pit. Coming to the sand filter. So what it is used for? Now we have model of both slow and rapid sand filter, which we will cover in the subsequent videos. But here we are seeing some common questions related to the sand filter. So what is it used for? It is used for the purification of drinking water. Enumerate the elements of slow sand filter. So supernatant water, sand bed, gravel support, under drainage system. Which sand filter uses smoothies for water purification? This is a slimy layer. So slow sand filter. Which sand filter produces better bacterial quality of water? Slow sand filter. Then what are the main advantages of a rapid filter? So it occupies less space, the rate of filtration is much faster, and it can deal with the raw water directly without the need to store. Then coming to the septic tank, the model is though not clear. As I am telling you again and again, we are going to see all the models subsequently practically when you are present here, and often we'll try to cover them by the medium of our videos too. So this is the septic tank. Now let's see the questions. Enumerate the salient features. So it is recommended for household level and not for the large communities. The liquid depth is recommended to be only 1.2 meters. There should be a minimum air space of 30 centimeter over the fluid level. The bottom should be sloping toward the inlet end of the tank. This helps in retaining the solids. There is one inlet and one outlet pipe. These pipes should be submerged and it should be covered with a concrete slab. Retention period is 24 hours. Now what are the stages of purification of sewage in a septic tank? Sewage treatment in a septic tank occurs in the two stages. First is, as we know, anaerobic digestion, and second is aerobic digestion. This we all know. Now first stage is anaerobic digestion. It occurs inside the tank, and second stage is aerobic digestion. This occurs outside the tank on the effluent let out of the tank into the subsoil. Then last is, mention some instructions for using a septic tank for the sewage treatment of the house. So first of all, flushing soap water and the disinfectants into the tank should be avoided, and it may kill the anaerobic bacteria present in the tank, which have a role in the sewage treatment. Septic tank should be emptied once a year and the sludge disposed of by trenching. New septic tank needs to be filled up with the water and then seeded using the ripe sludge from the another tank. Okay, so I hope I am clear with it, though these questions are a bit difficult because you have to see the model along with that for better understanding. Okay, but right now, because of the online classes and such situations, we are not able to do models and cover the theory simultaneously as we do in our practical classes. But by means of our next video, we will try to cover all the models practically also, so that you can see them properly. Okay, thank you, have a nice day. Your queries are always invited.